Welcome to Families Embracing Diversity. Today we have the pleasure of learning from an expert in family travel. We're speaking with Susan Whitehead from Wanderlust Families. Susan is the married mother of 6 who has had the pleasure of living abroad in Costa Rica, Mexico, and the United Arab Emirates alongside her family. She's also taken a 3-month family road trip to France, England, Wales, and Spain with her family. Today, she's here to tell us all about what it was like growing up in a bicultural family, how she grew to love travel, and what long-term family travel has meant for her and her family. Be sure to stay tuned for this awesome conversation. As I mentioned before, this is Susan, and I'm very excited to introduce her to all of you because she is living the life, and she is here to tell us all how to do just that. So before we get into that part, Susan, can you tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, what your childhood was like?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to meet you virtually in person. But I grew up in a bicultural family. I didn't really know what that meant as a child because you just know what you grew up in and it just seems normal, and it didn't dawn on me that it wasn't normal at all until I got to college. But my mom is Costa Rican and my dad was American, and we grew up in Naples, Florida, or I did. My parents actually got married in West Virginia, and I spent the first couple of years of my life, but my mom, being from Latin America, did not like the cold. And so she convinced my dad to move south to Naples, and that's where I spent my entire childhood. Growing up, it was not unusual for us to go visit family in Costa Rica every so often. I had my very first passport before I turned 1. I actually have a smallpox shot because I'm that old, and they were still giving out smallpox shots when you traveled. And so I've just been traveling my whole life. I remember going to Costa Rica and seeing extended family there. My grandfather lived there, had a few uncles that lived there, and just really enjoying being in this different culture. But I don't like I said, it just seemed normal. And then I would go visit my dad's mom in West Virginia. And it was just like, that's just what you do. You go on a plane and you wake up in a different place, and that's just life. But my parents always valued travel. My dad saw every continent except for Antarctica. My mom was an exchange student to the United States when she was in high school, and she spent a year in Pennsylvania. So they just passed it on. And I don't think it was necessarily a conscious decision like my husband and I have made for our 6 kids, but it was just part of life. I always had a passport, and it was always there for us to travel whenever the budget allowed.
That's wonderful. That's awesome. So besides traveling, did your family do other things that sort of introduced you to other cultures or made you interested in other cultures, or is that something that came in you later in life?
Well, when I was starting high school, I guess it was after 9th grade, my sister was really into gymnastics, and her gym coach got in contact with a gym coach in Romania, which was still communist at that point. And they worked out some kind of exchange where the U.S. gymnasts could train with Romanian gymnasts and coaches. And the opportunity came for me to go. Now, I was not a gymnast. I just got to go. So that's probably the biggest memory like that I have of introducing other cultures. And I don't know if that it was necessarily to introduce another culture per se, but just that my parents understood what a big deal it was and knew that I would get a lot out of it. And I absolutely did. We spent 3 weeks inside communist Romania. And we got to see the people and experience the culture. And it was really interesting coming from a free country and going to Romania. And I found like my notes that I wrote because we were forced. My mean mom made me like take notes when we were there. And I remember like the first impression I had of Romania was seeing the guards at the airport with their machine guns. And like we'd never seen that before. And turns out that we were actually, and I was just discussing this with my kids the other day, when we were in Romania, the tour guide that arranged the whole thing was really good friends with the gymnast Nadia Comaneci, who was like Romania's, princess at the time, because she was the first Olympic gymnast, I believe, to score the perfect score in all around, like in all the events. And they thought that our tour guide was trying to smuggle her out of the country because it was communist and she couldn't exactly come and go as she pleased. So while we were there, we had our rooms were bugged, our phones were tapped, and we were followed everywhere we went.
Gosh.
So we were treated like spies. But no, so that I guess that was just showed me that my parents really valued those kinds of experiences. And then when we got married, that was just something that we wanted to continue, not necessarily like be followed and treated like spies, but it was something that, we wanted to give to our kids too.
How old were you when you made that trip?
It was right before I turned 15.
Oh, wow. I can't imagine having that kind of experience at that point of life. What was it like then coming back and bringing that contrast into your life?
I actually wrote a letter to Reader's Digest. They had printed an article about Romania and really highlighting all of the negatives. And I wrote them a letter and saying that this is not at all what it was like. But we got exposed to things like exchanging currency on the black market and, dealing with just different flavors of foods. Like they had rose flavored ice cream, which I'm sure you could probably find in the grocery store here now. But that was just such a novel thing. Like I'd never had an ice cream flavored like a flower,
Right.
before. And then like dealing with jet lag and going on a train and seeing like pollution in the ocean there. It was such a contrast. And then realizing the freedoms that we have in the US, like we were told, you're not allowed to photograph any military buildings at all. And of course I did, but things like that. Just, it was very interesting to see such a different government system in action and then come home and have it really like sink in.
Right. What an amazing experience. That's awesome. So then fast forward, I don't know, 15 years, and you have a family with a couple of kids. How did you decide to leave normal life and travel around the world with your kids?
So that was really my husband and I had just had that desire all along. Even before we had kids, my husband had been an exchange student to Spain for one summer between his senior year of high school and his freshman year of college. And of course that changed his life. And we just had always thought he was in the military, he was in the Air Force. And we just thought, at some point we're going to get to explore one of these countries back here as a military family. And we just never did. So when he got out of the Air Force, we still had that desire, but honestly, we didn't have the money to do it. So it was a goal that I had written out on an index card that at some point by the fall of some year, we would be living overseas. And I really had no idea how it was going to happen. But in 2011, we had moved down to Florida. We were really struggling. I mean, to the point where I was going through my jewelry box to sell jewelry. I was babysitting. So we had 5 kids at the time. I was babysitting 2 more children on every Friday. And that basically covered our grocery bills for the week. I mean, we were strapped. And our landlord came one day and she showed up at the door and she had this peach pie in her hands with a big red bow on top. And I thought, this is not going to be a normal conversation. She's trying to butter us up for something. And she told us that we had to move out. And it was going to be at the end of our lease, but we had thought that we would be able to extend and maybe save up a little money and then move overseas. But realistically, I don't know how we were going to save up any money because there was not any left over to save. And my husband and we just knew this was our chance to go. And I had been researching, and I had discovered a few families online that were living in Latin America for way, way less. And so we thought, okay, this is God opening the door. We're just going to walk through it or run through it. So in about 100 days, it was only about 100 days, we went from normal life, normal with 5 kids, normal life, to boarding a plane to San Jose, Costa Rica. And it was those moments that really changed my life. I was crying when the airplane landed, and I'm just not an emotional person really, because we had achieved our dream against all odds. I think we maybe had like $3,000 to our names. And that was just from selling all of our stuff. We sold everything except for like scrapbooks, baby blankets, American Girl dolls that my girls didn't want to part with, and my wedding china. And that was pretty much it. And we landed in Costa Rica, not really having a plan. We had a place to stay, and we had a business that we had handed off to another family so that we could have some money coming in. But that was it. And I mean, we were hooked. Within that first week, I was awakened by my daughter's squealing and laughing. And I thought, what in the world is going on? And there was a local farmer who somehow had left a gate open, and there were horses eating the grass right outside our living window. So it was like, they were like, yeah, this is heaven. So that was our initial step into big travel.
That is amazing. I guess I always lived with the idea that in order to be able to do that, you had to be independently wealthy and have a bank account full of money to just be able to leave it all and go. But you guys just decided that was a priority and took a risk and jumped, basically.
Yeah. It would be easier if we were wealthy.
Yeah. But who has that luxury?
I know.
That's awesome. That's very inspiring. And so when you got there, did you realize it was easier to make a living and get by when you were there? Or what did you find when you got there?
When we got there, it was a big shift for my husband, because he had been really hands-on in this business. And honestly, 3 weeks before we left, we didn't know what we were going to do. And we happened to be visiting some friends, and she asked me right before we were going to go home, she said, "Can I pray for you about anything?" And I was like, "Tina, I have this business and it's making money." It wasn't enough to support our family in the US, but it was still enough that it was like, I don't really want to just shut it down. And they took it over. And like the next week we went over, transferred everything over to them, and we set up a 50-50 partnership. And for my husband, it was really good for him to be able to step back from like the day-to-day stuff and really have almost like, a 40,000 foot view of the business. And it grew a lot in the year that we had that partnership. And then after the year, we sold it to that family, and they still run it today. But then I also had like a newsletter service that I was doing, and I continued to grow that. After at the tail end of our 6 months that we spent in Costa Rica, we got a tax refund, which is always nice because you still have to file taxes even when you live overseas. And we used that to get my husband his certificate to teach English as a second language. So we then moved to Mexico, which we spent about a year there. Absolutely loved Mexico. And that was a big source of income for us, was him teaching English online to non-native English speakers. So one of the things that this traveling has taught us is that there's always a creative solution if you're willing to look hard enough to find it. And so we've done it through him teaching English, and he actually still teaches English online part-time. We've looked for different ways to make money, like with Amazon, with different online courses, with anything. But being in a situation like that, it was less stressful because our rent every month was $650 compared to, I think we were paying about $1,200. in the US.
Right.
And that included electric, water, and internet.
Yeah,
So it was like,
it's a big
wow.
difference.
It was amazing. It was amazing.
That is amazing. How did you decide where you were going to go? Did you have specific goals or things you wanted to experience, or did you just like point to the map and here we go?
It would be so much easier if I just pointed to the map and picked the place. We had originally wanted to go to Guatemala. And the main reason behind that was just because I had met a family and they had 4 kids. And I thought, if they can live in Guatemala with 4 kids, certainly we can do it with 5. And I just did not have a peace about it. That's the only way to describe it. And then I don't know why it didn't occur to us earlier, but it's like, let's just go to Costa Rica. That's where my mom is from. She still has aunts and cousins still living there. And so we picked Costa Rica. It was cheap to get to on JetBlue out of Orlando. It was also affordable, and I wouldn't say it was familiar because I hadn't been to Costa Rica in almost 10 years, and my husband and kids had never, ever been. But it was still really comforting to know that if something terrible were to happen, that we did have family there that could, come and help us out, or at least, translate any technical Spanish that we didn't understand. But it was a lot had to do with how much it cost to get there, and just that knowing that it would not be too hard to come home if we needed to, because it was just, simple, like less than 3-hour flight from San Jose to Orlando. And then just knowing that that we could find a place for really cheap to live there.
But since then, you've been to Costa Rica, Mexico, the United Arab Emirates, France, England, Wales, Spain. Like, how did you pick all of these subsequent places?
So, and I guess I forgot to say, when we first started out, we really wanted to go to Latin America to help our kids learn Spanish. Obviously in the US, Spanish is a huge asset to be able to speak it. Plus just getting to know the culture. And we knew it was very family friendly. So when we went to Europe, the main reason why we initially chose to go to England is because my husband took a course. And I said, if you're going to go take a course in England, we are all coming.
Obviously.
It's not going to be like you get to go and send us really pretty pictures and me stewing at home, being mad and jealous. So we picked England because of the course. And then we got to explore a little bit of the history. A lot of my dad's side of the family was from England. We actually, through a cousin of mine who's really big into genealogy, let me know that my 14th great-grandfather is Thomas Rogers, who was on the Mayflower ship from England to the US. And so we got to go to the church where he would have been baptized and married, and his children would have been baptized in England, it was magical. It was cool. One of the highlights of the trip. And it's not a place that a lot of tourists go. So it was really out of the way. It was a challenge to get there. And so we explored England, just saw a lot of different places. And then we went down into France and really wanted to see the Omaha Beach, Normandy, where all the US troops came in to help liberate Europe from the Nazis. That was super emotional. And then traveled down into France and then into Spain, which was special for my husband. We actually got our trip there cut short. We had planned to spend 2 months living in a rental home in Spain, but it was not adequate.
Oh.
They were having an especially cold winter. The house was not designed to stay heated for all 3 levels. And we were tripping breakers one after one, just trying to keep the house warm. It was right on the side of a mountain. And we said, no, we need to go. We had traveled really fast too. So the pace it burned us all out. I mean, we weren't really anywhere for more than 3 or 4 nights. So then we came back. So I still want to go back to Spain, but none of the kids are not really excited. Yeah, I mean, how do you get burnt out on Spain? But we somehow did. Um, and then for the United Arab Emirates, my husband actually had a job there. He was working for a Department of Defense contractor, and he actually spent, I think, close to 2 years. Is that right? 2 or 2.5 years. Um, and he really wanted us to come over, and I didn't want to go. I was scared. I was scared of, what would it be like living in a Muslim country with 4 daughters? Just even though I had become aware of the propaganda against Latin Americans when we were living there, I still bought into it about Muslims.
Right.
So it took a long time for him to convince me. And then it took a long time for us to get visas. So we went and we lived there for 6 months. And I'm so thankful that we had that experience, because now, not just for me, but my kids, they know that all the talking heads on TV and all the newspapers, they paint them in a certain light, and it's just not true. I mean, yes, for some there are radicals, of course, but I mean, we have radicals here in the US.
Exactly.
But that one was very deliberate to expose our children to, this huge religious group in the world that's not going away. And we need to know how to relate to them, and to, most of all, just not be scared of them.
Right.
I didn't want my kids to grow up being scared of Latinos and being scared of Muslims. And we've accomplished that, which just excites me to no end.
And that is a big accomplishment right now in our world.
Yeah.
So that's great that they have that knowledge and are able to defend that with real life experiences. Is there anything else you feel like they've gained or been enriched by your travels around the world?
Yeah, they don't see obstacles like I do. Maybe it's just because they're still young, but I think just when we traveled, we're not on vacation. I mean, Europe was kind of more of a vacation, but we just go and we live. And they've experienced so many of the challenges that we've had to face with us, because there's no shielding them when we're going through immigration and they're saying, no, you don't get a 180-day visa. You get 7 days. There's no way to hide that from them. And then dealing with like going on buses and metros and just dealing with all these things, they're just comfortable being uncomfortable. And I'm still learning that. I haven't quite gotten that mastered. But they just know that in spite of everything that we had stacked against us, especially the beginning. Now, when we went to Europe and we went to the UAE, my husband was making, decent money. We had saved up a lot for Europe. But they've seen that no matter what, if it's something that's really, really important to you, you can make it happen. And it might not be a simple path, like from A to B. It might be like, like this to get there. And they've just become more confident, a lot more confident than they ever would, especially our oldest. She was 13 when we first landed in Costa Rica, and she got to volunteer at a Costa Rican veterinarian's office, which never would happen. Would happen here. Just too much red
tape, right?
Yeah, exactly. And she would come home and she's like, Mommy, I got to see all these worms and take them out of this dog. And I'm like, oh, that's so gross. But it gave her confidence. And she was the only person, I think the veterinarian spoke some English, but nobody else in the office did. So it really pulled her out of her shell, because she's really, really shy. But it gave her a lot of confidence. And with the other kids too, it's almost hard to quantify what it does, because it's things that you don't see until they come out. And then it's like, would they always have been that way? I don't know. I don't think so. But they have just such a different perspective on the world that I wish I had had growing up.
Yeah. What a gift. What amazing lessons that you could never learn from a textbook.
Right.
So when you guys were abroad, were you homeschooling them? What did school look like while you were living abroad?
So we've always homeschooled. When we were in Mexico, though, we were there for so long, and we had local friends who enrolled their kids in a private bilingual school. We couldn't afford that, but we, let's see, my oldest tried out a private school, and she loved it, but she hated being around the other students. She
Oh,
didn't like how disrespectful the other students were. She was trying to listen to the teacher. She was trying to pay attention, and the other students were a distraction. So she's like, I would just rather do my school at home. So we did. My second daughter, she didn't want to try school, so she never did. My third and my fourth, we put them into the same public school. The only Americans, the only English speakers in this school. And my third daughter, it was really rough because she didn't understand as much Spanish. And the day that she went, she only went one day. The day that she went, she did not understand how they did snacks. And so she went the whole day without eating anything. And so she just crashed when she got home and just lots of tears, like, never going back. And so that was a scratch. My fourth daughter, we put her in that same school. Now she has blonde hair and blue eyes. So if you have this sea of beautiful olive skin and dark hair and big brown eyes, and then you have this little white girl sitting there. And she liked it, but she didn't like the attention. So the girls would come up and they would want to pet her hair because it was just, super fine and wispy, and touch her skin, and they wanted to borrow her crayons. Goodness forbid. So yeah. And then my son, he did really well for like a week in the Mexican preschool. And again, he was the only white boy there. And then I don't know what happened, but after a week he was done, and he was just crying and throwing a fit. And it was like, this is just not worth it. It's not worth the fight to get him to go. So that's the only experience they've had with, school in the traditional sense. So when we've traveled, we've just brought, math curriculum. They've done school online, workbooks, all that kind of stuff. We just travel with it, and they just do it as we go along. So sorry, that was a really long answer.
no, that's okay. That's okay. I know that's something a lot of people wonder about when they're thinking about traveling with kids. Well, how do they go to school, and what happens when they get back? So thank you. Thank you for the details.
Oh, and then my oldest daughter, so she's graduated. I was really concerned as a mom to think, because she wanted to go to college, and I thought, oh my gosh, I think I've totally ruined her for life. She has the most out of the box high school transcript you could possibly imagine. On it, like in her high school transcript, she did like a travel writing course. She took a master's level theology class when we were in Mexico. And she applied at the local community college because she wasn't really sure where she wanted to go. And we've said, we'll send you to college, but you better know what you're going to do. We're not going to pay, tens of thousands of dollars every year if you're just clueless. So she went and she applied, and they said, well, you have to take this test. Now, she never took the SATs or the ACTs, never. And they said, you have to take this test. If you want to do it now, you can. And go in. I think it's called the PERT test, P-E-R-T. And she sat down and she pretty much aced it. She was like 3 points shy on the math. And they said, if you come back, you'll do fine. And then you can place out of the entry level math. And so she did. And I was like, oh, it was such a relief because, we don't follow a boxed curriculum. We just don't do things the way a lot of homeschoolers do it. We definitely don't recreate school at home. So that was just a huge relief to think we hadn't ruined her life by giving her just a really, really out of the box education. So the kids learn stuff. And I've heard story after story of families who have, whether it was because of illness that they couldn't go to school, or the mom couldn't teach them for a certain period of time, or they've just been traveling, and the kids come back and it's like their academics are better than they were before they left, even without like sitting in front of a computer or sitting in front of books. So there's something that grows in their brains when they travel that I don't know. It just, it proves, I guess, that, doing these things helps increase your ability to think and to learn, without necessarily having to sit behind a desk.
Right. Well, you're using all those skills in real life. You're doing math to figure out change. You're problem solving to get on the bus. So there's definitely something to be said for getting our kids out of that environment and letting them just experience the world. Definitely.
Yes.
So when you aren't traveling, when you guys are in Florida just hanging out, is there anything you do with your kids to help them continue learning about new cultures or diversity or the world around them?
It's really hard. I mean, I'm half Costa Rican. I should be speaking in Spanish to my kids. I should be teaching them Spanish, and I just don't. Maybe because that's not what was modeled to me. I learned Spanish because my grandmother moved in with us when I was 5 years old, and I had to figure out why she was yelling at me because I didn't know. She was very, very strict. But I didn't know Spanish before then. My kids tend to get interested in things naturally. So our oldest son, he just turned 11. He is absolutely obsessed with all things Japanese. I mean, from Pokemon to origami to, anime to anything Japanese, he's like obsessed with. So he started asking, can we learn Japanese? I was like, dude, I don't speak Japanese. I can't help you learn Japanese. So we found this site. It's called, what's it called? Japanese from Zero, or something from Zero. And there's a site, and it has like a course you can go through, but they're all YouTube videos. So he'll just watch videos on YouTube. And then there was one little girl that my husband found who is like fluent in Japanese. It's like amazing. I'm watching this tiny little girl, and I think it was the same thing for her. She just picked it up on her own. So he's got workbooks on Japanese. He's got like a chart with all like the letters and trying to learn that. And he'll like try to say things to me in Japanese. And I'm like, buddy, I have no idea what you're saying. Duolingo app, he used that for a while, and then he got to a point where it was just too hard. And so now he's using mostly the YouTube videos and a workbook that we got. But one of my daughters, she's learning Italian through Duolingo. My other daughter's trying to brush up on her Spanish, the one that had her breakdown in Mexican. Maybe she's thinking, I never want to be in that situation again where I can't eat.
I have to know how to get food.
She has to know. So like I said, they've just picked it up kind of on their own. And they've always, ever since the very beginning, they've always just been interested in other cultures and learning different things. And, we're talking again about, hey, would y'all be up to going back to Mexico? Do y'all want to go back and live somewhere else? And there was a time where they weren't, where they were ready to just be normal American kids, but they're not. They're not normal American kids. They have seen other things, and they have passports, and none of their friends have passports, and a lot of their friends have never even been on an airplane. So, just realizing, even geography, like they just get interested in these things, and they kind of do it on their own. It's not a very good answer as a parent, except that I guess if they are expressing an interest, like my son, in Japanese, we'll do, whatever we can to help, him learn more about it. And then he's like, Mommy, once I get better at Japanese, we're going to Japan. I want to see the cherry blossom. And he's got this list, like his whole itinerary
Oh, that's
planned
awesome.
out. And I'm like, dude, that is like really expensive.
Well, you got your next trips planned, Italy and Japan, so
Yeah.
get ready.
Yeah, I know. Got to save up.
But I feel like they didn't necessarily just do that on your own. You showed them that that map is a whole world of places because they've been there and they've seen it and
Right.
they know that other languages exist. So even though
Yeah,
they are natural interests, I feel like you probably definitely have a lot more to do with it than you may realize.
probably.
Give yourself a little credit in there.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for telling us about traveling and about your family's experiences. I know you have a course that tells people about how to live abroad. Can you tell us a little bit about what's in that, who that might be for?
So it's the Wanderlust Families long-term travel course. And it's basically everything I could think of from all of our experiences traveling downloaded into 14 modules with printable action sheets that take you through step by step all the things that go into planning something like this. Each time we've traveled, it's been a little bit different. So the first time we sold everything to go to Costa Rica. Then from Mexico, that was pretty easy because we just kind of went home for a little bit to visit family and then just shot right back over to Mexico. To Europe, we had rebought a lot of stuff. And so we put everything in storage. And then when we went to the United Arab Emirates, we actually had house sitters come and live in our house and take care of our dog because we had a dog then. So it's all of those different things that we've learned, all condensed, well, not really condensed because it's a big course, but all put together in one place. So if somebody is really thinking about it and trying to figure out just all the little details that go into it from, your mindset, why do you want to travel and how does that determine where you want to go, which we talked about earlier. And then, how do you leverage what you have, so maybe you have a business, maybe you have a job. How can you make that happen? What do you do with your house? What do you do with your pets? All those different things are all in this course. So hopefully it will help you go from just an idea, I like to say, to go from your dream life and making that into your real life, because that's what we've been able to do. So if I can encourage anybody to do it, then I would love for them to go through the course because it's really changed all of our lives for the better.
It sounds like it. And I feel like that's an experience all of us need to have just to understand that not everything we see on the news or not everything that we hear is true of the entire world. So yeah. I agree. If you have desire to travel, go take the course and go. Well, thank you very much for your time and thank you for sharing your stories with us. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. And I'll link the information to your website and your podcast, which is full of helpful information, down in the description so that way anybody can find you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you again and enjoy the rest of your day and your next adventure.
Thank you. We will.
I got so much out of this conversation with Susan. I think my biggest takeaway was the fact that you don't have to be independently wealthy to travel long term with your family. Who knew? If you were just as inspired as I was, be sure to check out Susan's blog and podcast in the links below. If you were busy doing dishes and feel like you missed 3/4 of it, check out the show notes for a summary with all of the highlights in the link below. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and we look forward to seeing you again next week. Take care.